Hello, and welcome to this very special bonus episode of David's Divergent Discussions. I'm your host, David Gray Hammond, and today I'm once again joined by the marvelous Katie Munday, who is going to be talking about their research that they were involved in into trans autistic experiences, I believe.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll start with a brief visual description. I'm David Gray Hammond. I am a Mediterranean male in his mid-30s, wearing thick-rimmed purpley grey glasses, a black t-shirt that has the Emergent Divergence logo on it. I'm sat in a very blue room next to the notorious bookcase, and I have a beard, lip piercing, and an ear tunnel. Katie.
So basically I look exactly the same as David. No. So I am a large white person with thick frame glasses as well. I have short back and sides kind of haircut. You can see me from the shoulders upwards. I'm wearing a light green t-shirt. I have an eyebrow bar. I don't actually have any earrings in today, so that's about as exciting as it gets. And I'm sat in my front room. You can't really see anything apart from green curtains that are behind me. And I use they, them pronouns.
Okay. And we both got our hair especially cut for today's live. Like, it was definitely on purpose. We were like, we've got this very important live to do, this very important podcast recording, and so we need to have our hair on point. So I got rid of mine.
That's it. I got my hair. Yeah, I got my hair cut. Yeah, that's also another trans autistic nightmare, is getting your hair cut.
I can imagine.
To be honest. Yeah, like it really, really is. Because it's just, I was talking to another queer friend of mine, and I was just like, I don't know where to go. Like, where can I get my? Because every time I go to my hairdressers are lovely, and I've been going to them since I've lived here. But I'm like, I want short back and sides, and they're like, oh yeah, lovely. And then there's like a fringe. No, I don't want the fringe. I want like a men's, what would be considered a man's short back and sides. And yeah, it just doesn't compute for people that's what I want. So, but they've got a new hairdresser in there now, who's man as well, which is nice. And I was like, I want a men's short back and sides, and he was like, right, okay, let's do it. And I was like, yes. Oh my god, thank you. I haven't been to the hairdressers in like 5 months because I was dreading this. So yeah, the thought of having to change my hairdressers was just like too much.
I think, just being autistic alone makes changing hairdressers a nightmare, let alone when there are other intersections on how people are going to receive your request for certain haircuts.
Yes. And, I would always, so when I lived elsewhere with my mum and dad, there was a barber's there, and he used to cut my hair, and he used to cut my hair in kind of like a Renee cut, which is like, would be considered like a woman's skinhead cut. So you've still got a fringe at the front. You might have like feathery bits here and maybe a rat's tail, but the rest of it would be like grade 1.
Okay.
And he was fantastic. Obviously, I don't live there anymore. And then the other barbers around our way are run by Muslim families, and it's the worry about me going across a boundary about being considered a woman in a men's barbers when I am married and they are married, but we're not married together. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I've got in some very sticky situations with that in India, where that's really not ended. Really not ended well. So I also don't want to be going into places that is not culturally appropriate for me to go into. So yeah, that's so I was just sitting there thinking about all these things, and I'm just like, I just want to get my hair cut, mate. Like, literally, this is quite difficult.
Yeah. Whereas, there's me, who I'm aware of my privilege here, because I used to have hair that was like halfway down my back. I mean, like really long hair. And I walked in one day, went, cut it all off. And they went, are you sure it's lovely hair? And I went, yes, cut it off. And that was it. It was just done. No one asked a question because I'm a cisgendered male. It should be that easy for everyone. This is my hair. This is how I want it. Please do this. That is your job.
Yeah, it's really not difficult. So yeah. But aside from haircuts, other interesting and good things have happened this week too. So the work I wanted to talk to you about, David, and everybody else who's here, is work that that's been done with Holly Bruce and Stephen Capp and myself about how autistic adults access, or at least try to access, gender identity healthcare. And I will probably talk about my own dissertation as well whilst we're here, because that was also on trans and non-binary autistic narratives. So the stories that people that talk about their lived experiences, what they wanted to talk to me about. So yeah, they kind of interweave with each other quite a lot. I spoke on Laura Hellfield's, I'm hoping I'm saying their name correctly, the neurodivergent nurse. I spoke about this last week, I think.
Okay.
But it's just been published in Autism and Adulthood. And yeah, I can't really remember if I explained how it all worked, but basically, Stephen Capp teaches at University of Portsmouth. I was doing my master's there. Harley was doing another master's there. We were both doing something on a very similar topic. I'm trans and autistic. Harley is cis and not autistic. And Stephen is autistic but not trans. So we kind of fill in the voids of each other, if you will. And Harley was working with an adult who was autistic, had mental health differences as well, and was wanted to access gender identity healthcare, and they were just kind of flat out refused based on what was considered lack of mental capacity. So Harley just thought, well, like, does this happen a lot to autistic people? And so she did her master's dissertation on that, and spoke to 17 different trans and or non-binary autistic people, or just trans plus people, about their experiences of gender identity healthcare. It wasn't just based in the UK. She spoke to some people in Canada, a few places in Europe, Australia, and within the US as well, but across different states, because things are very different in the States with insurances, and they're not just different from kind of what would be considered the norm in Europe, but like different between states. And then, like, you know, obviously trying to access any kind of gender identity healthcare in Florida at the moment is just like a complete no-go. So yeah, and what she found was really, really interesting. There was this kind of really, what I think one of the biggest themes we found was that there was almost, people almost had to have a choice between, do I want to be honest in my coming out and being honest as being an autistic person, whether they were formally diagnosed or not, or do I want to have my trans and my gender affirming care actually kind of looked after? Because for all of the participants we've spoken to, and within research and within personal kind of anecdotes for me, like, a lot of people are exceedingly wary of telling their gender health practitioners that they are autistic, or think that they are autistic, or have family members that are autistic. Like, they're that kind of worried that they won't be taken seriously as a trans person because of the stigma attached to being autistic. They're still attached to being autistic. You know, this kind of infantilization of us being considered children, and like we couldn't possibly understand gender. So how comes you can understand gender better than I can? Or who makes you an authority over autistic experience when you're not even autistic yourself? So it's the same things we slam up against just pretty much all day, every day, being autistic anyways. And generally in autism research as well, still kind of just carries on this idea of us just being silly people who don't know what we're talking about, and we're deficient and we're disordered, and we're lacking so many things, and we're just so unknowledgeable, and and it just doesn't really help.
Yeah, I mean, really, what comes to my mind straight away is that in the autistic community, we always say, presume competence. Don't assume someone lacks competence just because they're autistic. But it sounds like when it comes to gender identity healthcare, there is a complete lack of presuming competence. It's, well, they're autistics. They couldn't possibly know what they want. They can't be trusted to speak on their own experiences, because look at the poor autistic person, who can't possibly understand the complexities of their own gender. And it also, on the flip side, to me, sounds like there is a certain level of pathologization of trans experiences, because they're saying, well, we've got to put something in place to stop the people who are so pathologically trans. And that's, so I see this sort of two-sided thing coming out where, autistic people can't be trusted to speak on their own experiences, but also trans people can't be trans people if they're not neurotypical.
Yeah, and I think there's, I think that's a really good point, and I think there's the two biggest issues with that right now are oh god, just trying to round it down to two things. I had two things in my head which I've slightly forgotten. But there's this kind of issue around thinking that autistic people are vulnerable. Not necessarily that we are childlike or that we are unknowledgeable, although that is absolutely an issue as well, but that we are vulnerable, we are susceptible to whatever this trans agenda that people keep talking about. I've not seen a copy of this. Have you seen? Do you know what's on the trans agenda? I don't know. Like,
I mean, I've been looking for it quite hard, and to
well,
my,
it exist.
if it does exist, it's an unwritten rule. So maybe that's why autistic people can't be trans, because we hate unwritten rules.
Because we don't understand the transgender that isn't written in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. So there's this kind of idea that we are vulnerable. So there's kind of a safeguarding element to it. If, like you say, they were safeguarding us from harm. And what transphobic people don't understand, and what a lot of people don't understand, is actually quite a good deal of gender identity healthcare, especially in the UK. Things move quicker, or can move quicker, in the US, depending on what state you're in, what insurance cover you have, all of that kind of thing. That actually quite a lot of it is talking therapy. Like a huge portion of gender identity healthcare is talking therapy. Looking at not just things that are specifically anchored to your gender or your gender expression, but also about kind of past trauma, various other things, how you're living at the moment and how you're feeling at the moment, but also post, if you were to have a medical transition, if that's what you were going in for, any kind of surgeries, hormone blockers, hormones, anything like that, what life would look like afterwards. So it's not just, I don't know where people get this idea that we just knock on the Tavistock and Portman or wherever and just say, can I have this part of my body chopped off or changed into something else, please? And it just magically happens.
Yeah.
It's just beyond ridiculous.
It's a long road. It's not just as simple as rocking up to a GP's office and getting a referral, is it?
Yeah, I mean, because first of all, your GP is not going to understand a single thing about going in. You would have to be exceedingly lucky with your GP for them to understand what gender identity healthcare is or how they refer you to it. Let alone you've got to be comfortable enough to tell your GP that. And then I think the wait lists at the moment are 4 years, 4.5 years.
Wow, that's
or your first appointment. That's for your first appointment.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? So, like, you know, so let's say I'll take my autistic diagnosis, for example, right? There was a good 4 or 5 years before I thought, yeah, no, I need to go see someone about this because there's something going on here and I want to explore that further. So it took me 4 or 5 years before I even went to my GPs, and then the 2.5 years worth of waiting there. So I had 7.5 years of thinking I was autistic before someone rubber stamped it and said, yes, that's you. And your OCD as well. Good luck. Oh God, I wasn't expecting that bombshell. Thank you very much. So you know, so you have so in gender identity healthcare terms as well, and I'm specifically talking about the UK here because I'm more aware of the stats here. So they are probably different elsewhere, but it's not going to be quick, easy. It's just not.
No, and in fact, if anyone from another country is watching and wants to weigh in the comments with experiences in other countries, please do. Only if you feel safe to, but you know, we'd always be interested to hear.
Absolutely, yes, please, yeah. So you know, you've got at least 7 years, let's say, of thinking, there's something that I'm questioning, you know, the gender that you were assigned at birth. Is it me? Does it fully represent me? Do I feel this way? You know, all of this kind of thing. Before you've even set foot in the door of a gender identity health clinic. Then when I was talking to Laura last week about this, we were talking about, you know, if you're in Wales, you don't have a gender identity health clinic there, so you've got to drive all the way, train, however it is you get about all the way to London.
And it's funny that you mentioned Wales because someone just commented saying that they waited 2 years for their gender appointment and 1 year for autism in Wales.
That's interesting. Oh, it's Ian. Oh, lovely. They are a person who comments on Autistic Living Dream quite a lot, so it's nice to have them here.
Welcome, Ian.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and also, like, and that actually reminds me of a really good point as well, is that if you're unsure whether whatever journey it is you have in your gender identity healthcare, because people can just go in, talk to people, and say, you know what, actually, these questions I've had, you've answered them. I feel happy in the body and in the gender that I was assigned at birth. People absolutely do that. And some people might be a bit more like me, where you can go in and talk to people, and I know that I'm trans, but I am unlikely to go through any kind of medical process. That's just unlikely to be part of my journey. Doesn't make me any less trans, doesn't make anyone else any less trans or non-binary. And then some people, you know, do this, do hormones. There's all sorts of different ways to access gender identity healthcare is what I'm trying to say. I think some people just think it's like a chop shop where you just go in and, you know, pick that chassis and that'll do, and thank you very much, and like, off you go. It's a lot more complex than that. And with that complexity comes, I've gone on to a different point now, but with that comes a lot of bureaucracy as well. So, which is another thing that Harley found in our work, was that, okay, so you've got all these different steps. I've got to talk to this person. I've got to speak. If I've got to go and speak to my GP, they've got to be confident to know who to refer me to. Then that person, who might be, so that a few people in the States, actually through my work and through mine, Harley and Stephen's work, said very similar things in the States. You've got to talk to a certain amount of psychotherapists, and you have to have a certain amount of hours spent with psychotherapists in order for you to even get your foot in the door of gender identity healthcare. Now, the problem comes with that is that the problems are severalfold, but the first one is that you might have a psychotherapist who is really neuroaffirming. They might not be autistic themselves, but they get it and they make accommodations for you, and they understand that you might, you know, need a choice in how you communicate, how you access things, all of this. But they don't understand anything about trans care. Or, I laugh because it's awful. Yeah, no, I'm gonna have to move you on to a different psychotherapist because, yeah, I can't support someone going in for trans care. Which, from the Harley and I together spoke to about 30 different people. That was probably experienced by about 6 or 7 different people.
That's
And,
quite
and,
significant.
and my work wasn't on gender identity healthcare. My work was just on basically whatever people wanted to tell me, really. So for it to come up that often in that number is quite, I don't know if shocking. It's not surprising. Unfortunately, it's not surprising, but it's still like really naff. Or, you know, on the flip side of that, really trans affirming and then almost information overload. I appreciate that you know you want to get me started and you want to help me with this, but this is a lot for me to process as an autistic person. It's already like a really highly emotive time anyways, and a scary time if you're going in for any kind of surgery and stuff like that. Scary time anyways, because it's a big transition. Like there's a reason it's called transition, you know. So yeah, there was this trouble, and one person in the group work said that they, oh no, it might have been in mine actually. Anyways, one of the participants said, I was spending so much money that I didn't really have, because you spend £300 talking to this psychotherapist. Oh, okay, you're autistic. That's fine. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna. Yeah, yeah, no, I'm not gonna have anything to do with trans care whatsoever. Or you go to this person and they're transforming, but not neuroaffirming. So they went to like 5 or 6 different people before they could even begin to get their hours together, before they could even begin to get in the door of gender identity healthcare. And I'm not being funny, like autistic people and disabled people, we don't have money. Like as a general rule,
No.
we are not affluent people.
No.
You know, there are systems against us in pretty much every walk of life that means that we are more likely to be in the criminal justice system. We are more likely to be unhoused. We are more likely to be sex workers. We are more likely to be underemployed or unemployed. So, like, as a general rule, we don't have money to be, you know, chasing around trying to find a psychotherapist who validates our experience. How dare you? It's disgusting. But there was another point, sorry, to what Ian added earlier, is that, you know, so if there's this issue with going through gender identity healthcare, which absolutely 100% exists, doesn't matter where you live. And it's also difficult to get an autism diagnosis. Again, doesn't matter where you live, it's a pain in the ass. So a lot of the participants in both mine, Harley and Stephen's work and my work were saying I had to choose. I had to choose whether I was going to be formally affirmed in my autistic hood, and therefore probably not be able to get the gender care I needed, or at least have a lot more red tape based around it, or whether I was going to go through my gender journey and whatever that looked like in gender identity healthcare, and basically just completely hide the fact that I'm autistic. Like I'm just going to have to turn up to somewhere that is exceedingly busy, very noisy, you know, with all this paperwork that I don't perhaps quite understand, or I need a bit more time to process it, but I don't really know how to ask for those accommodations. And how do you ask for those accommodations without saying, I mean, you can ask for accommodations without saying you're autistic, but you might feel like there's only a certain amount of times you can ask for things, or only certain things you can ask for without, you know, flying that little red flag for practitioners, which absolutely shouldn't be a red flag anyways. Someone in mine, Harley's and Stephen's work said that they felt like they had to person correctly. Like I felt like I wasn't going to get the care I needed because I wasn't personing correctly. And another participant said about how I believe they were also ADHD. So they were autistic and ADHD going in for a highly personal and emotive session in gender identity healthcare, and they were nervous because you would be. And they were moving around a lot. They were very restless, fidgeting a lot, not looking at the person who was with them. And it was suggested that they work on their mental health. They needed to have 1 year clear mental health.
Okay, I have to weigh in here. I don't know any human who gets 1 year clear mental health. Like, I know lots of people, much to my chagrin, none of us have good mental health. Like, the world we live in is not designed to make us happy. Like,
yeah, it's just completely and utterly bewildering on so many levels. Like, so starting from today, I have to have like 12 months of perfect health, mental health. So does that mean I have to go in for therapy? And are you organizing that, or do I have to do that myself? And then how are you keeping a track of whether my mental health is good or not? And what's the scale on that? Do you know what I mean? Like, my autistic brain just went like, I have about 1,000
you might like to know
on
that
how
Stephen Kapp is in the
work.
comments right now and has posted some quotes. So this one was from someone called Rebecca, and it said, because I'm doing it for trans healthcare, I need to have doctor's letters. I need to have this. I need to have that. It's literally roadblocks stopping us from being who we are. It's pretty much, you're asking permission to be yourself. And on the thing about personing, Stephen's also posted this quote saying that someone called James from Connecticut said, am I personing in a way that will get me gatekept away from this? Because there's always that fear too.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. Fantastic, mate. Yeah, and all names are anonymized, by the way, just in case anyone's worried about that. Yeah, so there were just so many really interesting quotes and things that people said, like really sad, frustrating, not particularly surprising for me, if I'm honest with you, but Harley's, I say because Harley did all of the interviews for people. Stephen was in a supervisory role and I was a mentor. But Harley had obviously created a space where these people felt comfortable enough to speak to her, which says a lot for someone who is cis and not autistic. For her to be able to get such kind of amazing insight from people. And there's lots, like, so hopefully Stephen will put the link to our article. That might be exceedingly brilliant, actually. I was trying to work out how to do that earlier, but as you know, not very good with tech. And it's free, actually. It's free access until July 15th. I do have the link, but I don't know what I'm doing,
So I have a burning question, actually. So there's a lot of misconceptions around how gender affirming care works. And I've got this thought in my head. Do you think, because over the past sort of 20, 30 years, there's been a popularization of elective plastic surgery. Do you think people are conflating, that it's just as simple as paying a doctor to perform surgery on you, much in the way you see in the news, this celebrity went and got their boobs done and this celebrity got their chin done? Do you think people are conflating the two and imagining that it works the same way, that you just go to a plastic surgeon, pay them their money and they do it?
Very possibly. And I think it's also interesting you say that, because the participants from both bits of work who were in the US, were denied certain things. Certainly, what would be considered top surgery. So that would be taking chest tissue and kind of and taking that away for someone. Because it was considered cosmetic. Oh, well done, Harley. Harley's here as well.
Harley and Stephen
Yay,
actually
that's
posted the
good.
link at the same time.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So I'm glad someone's organised, please. So yeah, there was complete denial on top surgeries for quite a few of the participants because it was considered cosmetic. It is considered that you do not need this to be able to live a quote unquote healthy life. Yeah. So yeah, it's actually a really, really good point because if people think that it is that easy to walk in somewhere and go in with one body and come out with another, then but then a lot of people do like to read The Sun, which I feel like
Yeah,
that doesn't
no,
help.
I mean, there's a lot of, in general, I think newspapers probably just shouldn't talk about trans issues because
But they will do because it sells and because apparently it's
yeah.
divisive
Let me be
for some
clear, I'm not
reason.
saying they shouldn't talk about trans issues. I'm saying the people who currently write the articles should not be allowed to talk
Oh,
about
should
them
not.
because they do
No,
not
thank you.
handle it well. Like,
No, because handling it well doesn't
and if you
doesn't
want
sell
to talk about people
newspapers
who've got an
because we live
agenda,
in a society that hates people.
it's not the trans people who have an
Yeah,
agenda, it's the people
yeah,
writing the news
exactly.
articles.
You know what the trans agenda looks like? The trans agenda looks like living to your old age in your house or your other living situation with possibly a partner and probably a cat. And that's what the trans agenda is, mate. Like, you just want to go to work and
And
not
let's
get
be
beaten up.
realistic here, because that
Like,
sounds almost facetious saying living to old age, but actually, trans people who can't access gender affirming care, there is an increased risk of them not making it to old age.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm not taking the piss when I say that. Like, I'm really not. And when you overlap that with I don't like to say heightened risk because it makes it sound like it's our fault when it's not. But autistic people are more likely to self-harm or take their lives. Like that's just an awful fact of autistic being. Not from an autistic, it's not autistic people's issue. It's the issue that's put on us by society that constantly says, you're weird, you need to change, and then you change, and they're like, no, not
Yeah.
like that. Not like that, you're doing that wrong. You've changed wrong. All these hoops you've jumped through. Actually, no, you've done that all wrong. And then they wonder why autistic people have
And
exceedingly
yeah,
poor
this is
mental health.
something,
And then when they go to gender identity healthcare and they're like, oh no, you need to work on your mental health first. Well, like the world's on fire, mate. Like literally, it's full of so much hate and bigotry and disgusting behavior.
yeah,
Like so if you're twice marginalized, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times
and
marginalized,
this is
like
exactly what I was going to say.
the old
You
stack
take
against me.
autistic people who are a marginalized group, you take trans people who are a marginalized group, you take an autistic trans person, like it's not like twice marginalized, it's like a whole other level of marginalized. It's not like adding blocks, it's like an
Mhm.
exponential curve. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's not to say that. So the work that I did was more to do with narratives, because although absolutely looking at access and gender identity healthcare and various other things is really, really important, I'm also acutely aware that when we talk about what would be considered trans issues, when we talk about trans experiences and trans embodiment, there is an awful lot of sadness um, and pain and anguish around not inherently about being trans, but just about how society treats us. And exactly the same with autistic experience too. So when you're both, like you say, like, it's mega. So what I wanted to do with my master's dissertation, so Harley and I were doing our dissertations alongside each other, actually, and we just happened to be doing it at the same uni around the same area, which is, I don't know what the odds of that is, but it's pretty amazing. So what I wanted to do with the work that I did, I spoke to 13 trans, non-binary, and agender people. I was just trying to think what people were identifying as. And I just kind of started off with like 1 or 2 questions and then was like, what do you want to talk about? Like, I know I'm trans and autistic, but I am one trans autistic person. I can't speak for your experiences, and I certainly can't speak for some kind of monolithic, the
Or
trans
just say you took a sort of
autistic
semi-structured approach.
doesn't exist. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For like boring research people, I took a biographical narrative method of investigation. Okay. So there we are. So basically, it started off with one question. Please don't ask me what it was, David, because I can't remember. And then basically the conversation went on from there in whatever kind of direction they took us in, which when obviously I'm autistic and ADHD, quite a lot of the people I spoke to were autistic and ADHD. So what was supposed to be like an hour didn't necessarily stay as an hour, and we did not stay on topic. There was no topic to stay on anyways, but even if there was, my goodness, we did not stay on topic. But that's what brings richness to stories. I think there are, I wanted to make sure that as a trans autistic person, what I wasn't doing was emulating what most cis non-autistic people in research do. Is to say this is the weird, funny little what one participant in my work said, poking the slime. I want to poke this slime, the trans autistic slime. Let's have a look at that. I didn't want to feel like I was doing that in any way, shape, or form, and I definitely didn't want my participants to think that. So it was about like, let's have a space where you can tell me what you want to tell me. My goodness, did people tell me some stuff? But also, like, some of it was really good, positive, joyful. And that's what I was kind of hoping to get as well. If there's this idea of autistic people being vulnerable and they're being coerced into whatever it is we're supposedly being coerced into, long waiting lists, apparently. But actually, what is the real story here? Like, are we just all sad, unhappy people, dragging ourselves through life? And the answer is that's for some people, absolutely. And most of that is based in society's perception of us as autistic and us as trans, and childhood abuse as well, for goodness sake, and trauma and various other things that trans people go through and autistic people go through and trans autistic people most definitely go through. But also there's a lot of joy. People were talking about chosen family, definitely came up quite a lot in my work, and especially around pets, fur babies, linked to Katie's separate MRes research. Oh, Stephen, you're on it. I'm loving it. Yes, so that's free to access as well. My my dissertation was 20,000 words long. I know that is not everyone's cup of tea. So the link that Stephen's put there and David has shared as well actually takes you to the full thing if you want to read that. If you're a bit nerdy like me, you want to read the whole thing, absolutely. I've also got a plainer language version, so I've taken all the citations and all the wibbly wobbly bits in it that you don't necessarily want to read, explained a few more words, taken out all the long fiddly words that you don't need. I've also done a plain language for summary as well. I've also got infographics, like just deep dive into my website if that's something you're interested in, because it's all there. Which raises an interesting point, is that not only did I not want to have too much direction on the conversation, it's also about who gets to access this afterwards. So not only what questions might we ask, and what outcomes might we produce, but also like, who is it for? What is it for? What is the reason for research? And who can access it, and who should have the ability to access it, which for me is everybody. So that's why I wanted to make a plain language version, because I am I'm acutely aware not everyone has the spoons or the capability to read something that is that long. And I'm trying to do the same. Well, I'm not trying to do the same. I'm doing the same in the cancer research work that I'm doing as well. So that's all on there as well. If people want to have a look into that, I did a cancer research project on the accessibility of cancer services in the UK for disabled people. And I'm just about to start a project for trans plus people around the same area as well, which is really exciting, if that doesn't sound particularly strange. Yeah. I'll let you talk for a minute, David. I need to have a drink.
Well, for anyone listening to this after the fact, perhaps in podcast format or watching it on YouTube afterwards, I will provide these links in the description so that you can go away and have a look at them. But I think it's really important that we sort of let people write their own narratives, because when you're part of a marginalized community, you're assumed to have a somewhat arhetorical existence. Like you don't get to be part of the rhetoric around your own existence. And I think it's really important that people are. I made a post yesterday actually saying, you know, for example, with autistic people, we should be part of telling our own stories. And in the same way, trans people should be telling trans stories. But interestingly, I've just started reading Queer Silence by Smilge. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And they talk in it about the value in what isn't said by queer people. So there's a great deal of value in the activism and the words that they do use, but also there is a value in what they don't speak of. And listening to this today, it's made me think, for all the things that have come out in the research you've done, there are probably millions of more aspects, nuances to this conversation that they haven't voiced. And it makes me wonder, you know, is this the tip of the iceberg? The issues being faced that are being spoken about? You know, what's below the surface that isn't being publicly addressed right now?
Yeah, and my work, I believe there was the same issue with mine, Harley and Stephen's work. Is it is not intentionally, but is white centric, is European centric, is English speaking centric, because I am ignorant and I cannot read or understand other languages. You know, so there is definitely that as well. Like, we might have a relatively okay understanding of trans autistic experiences, but it is still very white centric. And I don't know if I am the person to be able to break that cycle, or even how I would do that, if I'm honest with you. I would love to be able to help someone to do that, but I don't know how to do that, if I'm honest with you. But it's an issue. It's an age-old issue with academia and science, because everything is white centric.
Science, especially the social sciences, is very white European centric. And I think there's a lot to be said for the effect of colonialism on the way that the social sciences are conducted, because historically it's often been people with a great deal of privilege who have had the opportunity to engage with academia. And certainly I'm seeing a move away from, you know, everything being written by very privileged people, but that's not to say it's not an issue. You know, even when we consider autism research, how much of autism research is actually conducted by autistic researchers? You know, in the autistic community, we very much feel there's a growing trend towards sort of participatory and emancipatory models. But actually, is there a growing trend, or are we sort of biased in what we see because we engage more with autistic researchers? Because, when I'm writing articles, I start searching things in, and like 99% of what I'm reading is very pathological, very not neuroaffirming, and it makes me go, wow, people are garbage. like, like,
Yeah, for real. Yeah. And these people are
yeah,
knighted, It's not like who's decided this? This is like the most ridiculous thing
yeah.
in the entire world. It's absolutely disgusting. And just really ignorant, and it's bad science. Like, even just take the bigotry out of it, which is horrendous enough as it is, it's really poor science. Like, the fundamentals of what's going on in some autism research is just shocking. And their focus is so peculiar. Like, in some trans autistic work, there's there's this real kind of focus on talking to parents and carers. Why on earth are we still talking to parents and carers of autistic people? Why are we still doing this? Why are we obsessed with what our teachers have to say, with what our
I feel
therapists
like
have to
they've had their
say,
chance
with
and
what our
they've made it.
mums, dads, our cats have got to say? Why isn't someone
They've made
actually
it.
talking
The
to us
people
and treating
around
us like
us have made it
human
very
beings?
clear what their opinions and experiences are, but they're still being
Yeah.
asked to reiterate
We've
them.
got 80 years of research on that. Thank you very much. I'm very aware that people think we're a pain in the arse.
I make a career of being a pain in the arse. So.
Exactly. You see, that's it. So yeah, so there's definitely that, and there's definitely this focus on what would be considered prevalence rates, and I hate that word, especially to do with this, because again, it's when you say prevalence instead of co-occurrence, or co-occurrence would probably work. There's this kind of like prevalence is almost like kind of risk factor, like if you're trans, you have the risk of also being
Yeah.
autistic. Do you know what I mean? There's like, as if one what would be considered pathology is causing the other. Do you see what I mean? So there's just you just think, I don't understand why some researchers research what they do. I just don't, like, even from a even if I were to take emotion out of it, I don't understand the logic behind some things. Okay, so if there's an overlap of trans plus experiences and autistic embodiment, absolutely, that's a really good thing for us to know about, because that changes how we do practice in gender identity healthcare. It changes practice in mental health care. It changes practice in a lot of things. But if your research isn't suggesting how to make changes within those practices, why on earth
Yeah.
are you doing research? Like, it's like saying, oh, I'm just going to write 6,000 words on this thing's weird, that thing's weird, and my conclusion is, yeah, it's all weird. How is that helping anyone? That's completely and utterly bonkers. Like, it's just I don't understand it. I don't
Also,
understand.
Stephen is still on it.
David.
Here is the link to the plain language summary. It's cut it off on the screen because it doesn't like the length of the comment, but go looking for that. Stephen has just noticed that they were threading wrong, and most of their posts are in reply to Harley. But if you're looking for the link to the plain language summary, it's there. But
It's in
no,
there somewhere.
certainly,
Thank you. I really appreciate
I
that.
see a lot of, I see a lot of research on various social issues that says an awful lot without actually saying anything useful. And you sat there like, did someone genuinely fund this study? Like what were they hoping was going to come out of it? Like, in my own fields of interest, like autistic people and substance use, I see lots of research going, yeah, autistic people are more likely to self-medicate. Cool. So what do we need to change? Well, we don't know. We just thought you'd like to know. Like, turns out that David bloke's been talking about the right thing for years. Ask him.
Yeah. I know, they're just really focused on, oh, this thing's a bit weird and that thing's a bit weird, and it just seems to be their focus on things. But you keep telling us the same things. Okay, so what happens next? What happens if autistic people are more likely to get addicted or use drugs or whatever it is. Like, okay, so what are we changing with services? Are we going to actually have anything in the UK for autistic adults to be involved in? No. Are we going to help them get employed? No. Are we going to help support them, get them out of the criminal justice system? No. Are we going to help them get diagnosed earlier so they can get the mental health they probably will need earlier? Well, no.
Do you know what? Like, there's so much.
So
There's so
what is
much
the point of
acknowledgement
this?
that we have these significant issues. Do you know what's a significant issue to me? That on average, we live something like 20 years less than non-autistic people, and we are something like up to 7 times more likely to attempt or complete suicide. Why is no one addressing this issue? Great, you've told us, do something about it, because I'm autistic and I don't like the idea that me and my neurokin are dying before their time just because the world's a shit place to live.
Yeah, exactly. And it's exactly the same stuff in LGBTQIA plus research as well. Like, oh, we're increased risks of being, they use homeless, but I prefer unhoused. More likely to have STIs. That comes up all the time. And I'm just like, okay, so what does that mean for our sexual health clinics here? Oh, well, they're all closed. Amazing. So are we going to talk about queer issues in sex and relationship education? No, because a bunch of Karens aren't happy about it. Oh. So we're all going to admit that we all know what they call risk factors. We're also going to sit there and go, yeah, well, I'm just the person who brings the information. I'm not really responsible for anything that happens after that. And that's just a really sad world that we live in.
Yeah,
I don't know if we've gone amazingly off topic or
stayed on topic. Weighed in and said that the famous lifespan study is a little inaccurate because most of the participants were still alive at the time of the study, but we do face adversities, yes. And it's true, the fact is that autistic, especially autistic and trans people or autistic people on various intersections, having a really, really rough time of existing. And it's time that people actually did something about it, It's not enough to just do the research and go, cool, do with that what you will. Like, I'm a big believer that, we need to look at things like psychiatry, and consider, is this current diagnostic model working? Or in my opinion, I think psychiatrists are in a really great place to affect social change. You want to improve people's well-being, have psychiatrists championing the causes that are going to improve the well-being of people coming to them. Because people don't go to a psychiatrist necessarily because they're broken by natural default. They go to a psychiatrist because they have been deeply affected by power imbalances and structural oppression, And that,
I don't know. I think that puts a lot on psychiatrists to, break down systemic ableism and racism,
we've
the
got people in
patriarchy.
these positions of power over people's lives, and psychiatry is just one example. People in these positions of power in people's lives who could affect real change through collective action, and yet most of the time they're being used to contribute to the very same stigma that's resulted in people arriving
there. And it comes back to the age-old thing of the people who are oppressed, whatever group that might be, having to do all of the work themselves. Like, it is exhausting to be part of a marginalized group, and then having to literally fight for everything all the time. Like, I don't think I've had you and I were talking about this before, David. We were talking about the fact that I don't think I've had a single day this week where a transphobic bomb hasn't exploded somewhere. Before I came on here today, I was reading about the changes, not just in relationship and sex education in the UK, but also just how faculty members and everybody else kind of conducts themselves. So Section 28 was brought in by Maggie Thatcher. It was eventually repealed in 2003. And basically, for those who don't know, the queer issues couldn't be spoken about at all. Like, even if your geography teacher was a man who lived with another man and they were in a loving relationship, absolutely could not bring that up at all. If anyone brought up any kind of conversations about homosexuality, anything like that, I think the wording in Section 28 was something to do with going against stuff that went against family values or something like that. Or I can't remember what the wording was, but it's just absolutely awful. And and now we're 20 years later and the same kind of stuff is coming back in, which is really scary business. And it's coming back like harder now than it has in the past. So you just think, and it's Pride Month, mate.
This is the problem when people want to enforce a normative agenda, marginalized groups become acceptable, and they're not acceptable losses at all.
Well, you see that in the AIDS crisis. I mean, many straight cis people were also lost in the AIDS crisis, but they were considered, well, not that many, because there was enough queer people who also died of AIDS and still live with complications of HIV and AIDS. So they were considered disposable. And we still live in society like that, and people saying, "Oh, well, you've got marriage equality," and which is questionable, anyways. But and you've got these other things, and shouldn't you be happy? And like, why is queer pride still happening? And then people just open up on Twitter and just be really transphobic about a group of people that they're supposed to have been supporting for the last 30, 40 years, and you're just like, that's why we've still got to have pride every year. I'd love next year or in any year of my life for us not to have a pride, autistic, queer, or otherwise. That would be lovely, mate, because that means that we can just go about our business because people aren't terrible.
I will give a trigger warning for assault here, to like physical assault, but people make certain assumptions when they look at me, this big beardy bloke with a shaved head. And they say, well, why don't we get straight pride? And as a queer person, I have an answer for this. Because when I was in my 16th year of life, I was put in hospital 6 times in 1 year for being a man wearing makeup. Like, that's why we have queer pride, because if I can't queerly express myself without fear of violence, then I need to protest against that. And that's what pride is. It's a protest. Like, we're not there going, look how great we are. We're there going, we are human. Treat us as such.
Yeah. Who was it I was speaking to? It might have actually been Stephen, actually. It might have been Monique and Stephen, actually. And I was talking about the fact that it wasn't those two people at all. The heat is completely and utterly, I've just lost it. It was somebody else entirely, but that doesn't matter. I was talking about the celebrations and the holidays that we have as trans people. So we have Trans Day of Visibility, we have Trans Awareness, and then we have Trans Day of Mourning. So basically, out of the 3 holidays that we have a year, we have Notice We Exist, Please Don't Kill Us for Existing. Don't really know what to do with that, if I'm honest with you. Like, that's just a really sad indictment of this world, really.
But I feel like we should probably try and wrap up with something slightly less everything is garbage. Are there any positives that came out of your research?
To be fair, it is a lot easier to talk about the bad stuff, and I will say that in research as well. Like, there's potentially a bit of bias there, because if people think that they have a safe space to talk, and they absolutely did with me and my work and Harley and our collective work, then 9 times out of 10 you're going to have people come and tell you the bad stuff, the frustrating stuff, the stuff that they feel like they can't tell other people. But that kind of skips over kind of gender euphoria and autistic joy and trans joy as well. And there is a lot of that to be had. I'm trying to think of any participants who said anything. They did. They really did, David. They told me nice things.
Well, I think
promise.
one of the nicest things we can take away from this is that these trans autistic people had a safe space where they could tell their truth. And that's what we need more of.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they are becoming bigger. You know, I am by no means the first trans autistic person to do research with trans autistic people. Maxfield Sparrow edited a book called Spectrums, which is really, really, really good read. I think was everyone trans in there, trans and non-binary. Obviously, yeah. So there, it's got to the time of the evening, David, where I don't have a brain anymore. But the work out there exists, which is really, really good. So what I wanted to do with my work, and what Harley didn't know that she wanted to do with her work, but she kind of has inadvertently, is to make work that actually is based around our experiences, by us, for us, you know, nothing about us without us. The old Charlton phrasing from kind of disability activism. And it's getting there. I think it's very, very slowly getting there. And I think it is with autism research as well. I would not necessarily say the same for trans research. It's tough. But it is getting there. And you know, even just I wouldn't have to say safe spaces online, because I don't think any spaces online are 100% safe, because I don't think they can be. But you know, there's many trans autistic spaces I'm on Facebook and other social media and stuff like that. You know, and as much as people get trolled and stuff like that, as I certainly do, there's a great deal of people who also email me and say, I'm really glad I found your blog, or I came along to some of your training and so much of it resonated with me. It's really important that you know, queer autistic people are being able to lead training in this, and so there's some positives to it as well. Definitely.
Yeah, Stephen.
And just the joy of actually being. Oh, no, nice. Can I? Do you mind if I read this, David? Is that right? As soon as I've forgotten everything. So Stephen's put up on the screen here, which is fantastic. Positives. A few participants told Harley they had a good experience in accessing gender affirming healthcare. Only a few were still trying to access gender identity healthcare, yet only one was definitely denied access. Yeah, so some people did actually have a really good time. I believe there was... I don't know if I can be specific what area they were in, but they were in the north of England. And they had, you know, actually access to a really quiet gender identity healthcare clinic. Communication worked out really well. Things went relatively quite speedily. They had things explained to them quite well. I believe there were choices for kind of communication methods and stuff like that. So they had a really good experience of that. And yeah, I think I've brought up chosen family as well, was like a big thing. Another big thing, just talking about kind of unemployment and underemployment for autistic people. When you're trans, obviously that adds another layer of complexity. So a lot of the people I spoke to in my dissertation were actually self-employed. You know, so there was a music teacher who teaches piano, and she was a teacher for some amount of time, and then just thought, oh my goodness, this is overwhelming. And she now teaches in her own studio. She's got like a real flexible amount of time around it. She, you know, she just sorts out her own her own everything, apart from kind of needing help with kind of tax paperwork and all of that kind of thing. Like she's doing her own thing. Fantastic. That's amazing. Like, yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people who I was talking to in my dissertation were very keen activists. They were like, this has happened to me, and I don't want that happening to other people. And I especially don't want that happening for young people. So even through all the turmoil and all of the confusion, there are some, they shouldn't have to be this resilient, but there are some really resilient, really strong people who are saying, no, this isn't right. So I am going to get into activism. I am going to live that every day. Or I'm going to go do advocacy online, or I'm going to, I know between you and me, David, like the amount of us autistic people we know, I was about to say whether they're queer or not, but pretty much every autistic person we know is queer. We all work in health and social care. Like, we teach, we're youth workers, we work in the criminal justice system, we work in social care. Like, I don't actually know that many autistic people who don't work in some kind of caring, teaching, nurturing kind
It's a
of
real middle
capacity.
finger to the people who say we have no empathy, really.
It's funny that, isn't it? So yeah, I think although there is a lot of hardship, there's also community and compassion and beauty and authenticity. And I think every time someone says, yeah, I'm trans, or gender diverse, or yes, I'm autistic, or I'm ADHD, or I have cerebral palsy, or whatever it might be, I think that just opens things up for everyone. It makes the world better for everybody, not just disabled people and not just queer people. Because diversity is beautiful, right? If we were all the same, like, how boring would that be? If we were all like me, we'd eat chicken nuggets for tea, and and that would be it. There'd be no food being made whatsoever.
To manage one of me, let alone if there were 7 billion of me.
Yeah, I like you, but not that much, mate.
Could you imagine 7 billion of me doing a live stream every week?
Oh my god, you would have written like 8 million books by now.
I mean, let's not rule that out. You know what I'm like for writing. That's just one of me.
Yeah. So there is joy to be had, and there is love, and there is community, and there is compassion. So it exists. I think just the people who are experiencing that to such a lovely level that they don't necessarily want to talk to people like me in research. I'm hoping that's what's going on anyway.
Yeah. And Sonia has just commented to sort of weigh in on this, that they say, I agree, a lot of ND people I have met tend to work in care, health, or education. Some of the most compassionate people I have ever met. So
yes, absolutely.
And I certainly think, the circles I run in, people really just care about helping other people. And I think that's why we need more researchers such as yourself, because you're making change one paper at a time. So, but I'm aware we've been going for over an hour now, so it's probably time to wrap up. But it's been really...
I think I spent 20 minutes of that trying to think of something positive.
Well, sometimes you don't have to say something positive, I guess, but I'm still working on my normative standards. I subvert a lot of expectations. My need to be positive a lot, need to work on that. But
yeah, I have that on the end of posts. I'm like, I feel like I should have some kind of positive encapsulating things, but it's actually just sometimes things are just crap.
Yeah, I've got something positive. My son's third tooth started coming through today. So yeah, you watch out. He's going to be biting people before we know it. Yeah,
eating grass.
I lie. He's already biting people. But yeah, Katie, it's been really great having you on talking about this research. And thank you to Tanya Adkin, who has been monitoring the comments. Sad that we have to do that, but it's appreciated nonetheless. And on Thursday this week at 7:30 p.m. British Summer Time, Katie and Tanya will both be on here, and we will be talking about neurodivergent parenting. So that will be fun. Oh, look, there you go. Tanya's just commented, "Hey, all." There you go. So, yeah, on this coming Thursday, so later on this week, come back 7:30 p.m. British time, and we'll be talking neurodivergent parenting. In the meantime, thank you for listening to this episode. It's been really good. Thank you so much, Katie, for coming on and talking about your research. It's really cool, and I actually need to read the research paper because I keep going, I'm going to read that, and then I get distracted. So,
unbelievable.
But thank you to everyone who's weighed in the comments, especially Stephen and Harley. And we'll catch you all in the next episode. So thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone.
Cheerio.